Ask away.
Hi, and welcome to the Raw Heart and Soul podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Carroll, and tonight I've got someone interesting to speak to who I've known Meghann for, 12 years or so. I'm going to give you a bit of an intro about Meghann and then we'll get straight into it. So Meghann Birks is a transformation coach and speaker with nearly 2 decades of experience working one-on-one and in groups and soon to be online in courses. She uses a wide range of modalities and works intuitively to help her clients live a life guided by joy and purpose. She is particularly fascinated by the role of She's particularly fascinated by the role of narratives in shaping our realities and how we can rewrite the script. She loves working with creatives to help them find their voice and bring their ideas to life. Working with her is not for the faint of heart, as she will take you deep, but loves exploring the depths alongside her clients. Welcome, Meghann.
Thank you so much for having me. I make my clients write their own bios all the time and read them because it's a great practice for getting over imposter syndrome. Because when I hear someone read my bio, I think, who are they talking about? They sound cool.
Sound really cool, don't they? It's awesome.
But that's me.
How old is your youngest child?
So my husband and I were trying to work out the other day how long we've known you. So Louis just turned 8 on September 1st, and he was, I think, only a few weeks old when I met you.
Yeah.
Yep, I was still breastfeeding. So my mom had come along for the day, and my husband was there and was kind of bringing him in and out so I could breastfeed him when we were at a Whole30 seminar. But I think I've connected with you maybe a little bit in the online space.
Before that, wasn't it?
Previous to that, because I think that was really at a point, which is amazing how things have changed. I mean, that was only 8-9 years ago when primal, paleo, primal fitness, natural movement practices were all, I don't want to say quite a new thing, because I think I've discovered since then there was actually a lot more of it going on than I knew about, but the exposure hadn't happened yet. So it was still quite this niche thing, and I would get really excited when I met anybody.
That's right. I remember your first email. Yeah, it was like, I finally found someone in Melbourne who does this stuff that I do.
Yes, who doesn't think I'm a weirdo for some of these things that I'm exploring. So yeah, so I think it's probably been about 8 years now.
Yeah, feels like so much longer than that.
It does. Time has, especially this year, it's a bit like when you have tiny babies and people say to you, the days are long but the years are short. And that's a very accurate representation of when you have small kids at home. The days kind of drag on, but then you blink and they're nearly, like, my oldest one's almost a teenager now.
Wow.
So I don't even feel close to being equipped to parent kids of this age. So
maybe we need to do another podcast on that topic as well, because I've got a bit of.
I was going to say, you've got a lot more experience in that arena than I do, so I'd love to hear more about that.
So today we're going to talk about your soul purpose.
Yes.
So my first question for you is this: what do you spend the majority of your time doing at the moment during the day, and how has that changed recently since COVID?
So I spend the majority of my time today trying to cajole my children into doing their homeschool tasks. I put a little post up on my Instagram the other night where I basically run some basic maths about the number of requests that I probably make in an hour in terms of sit down, log on to this meeting, please get your pencil, grab your eraser, put your sink in put your dish in the sink. Then I multiplied it by the 2 children that I have. And then I multiplied it by the fact that it takes on average 3 to 5 times of repeating each request before the request is actually honored. And, conservative kind estimate had me making, about 1,600 ignored requests per day. So,
wow.
And judging by the response, I'm certainly not alone in the boat on that. Yeah. So, making powerful requests, I'm really good at that with my clients. It's not working so well with my 2 boys. Yeah. So that's changed a lot. Yeah. So that's changed significantly for me since COVID. So I've actually only been coaching and writing full time since October of last year.
Wow.
It's been a bit of a dabbling process, and we can get a little bit more into that in a minute because that's quite a story. Yeah. But kind of, really at the beginning of this year, I'd had a health scare last year, which is what I'll talk about soon, but I was feeling really good. I was feeling energetic, feeling really clear and committed and driven and so devoted to this purpose in my life. For the first time in my life, I was giving myself full permission to completely explore this path, and then COVID happened. And certainly for the first 6 weeks were actually kind of a nice, like, oh, this is a nice break. And we had
Bit
so
of
much
a
more
novelty,
time.
wasn't it?
It was a novelty, and we had a bit of time, a lot more time at home together. And my youngest son, he wasn't enjoying, but our kids' school has been amazingly supportive in terms of the mental well-being of the family is far more important than the curriculum at this stage in the game. So please just, do what you can. And they understand he may not spend as much time doing his phonics online, but he's outside building things from dawn till dusk. So he's developing his education in other ways.
Absolutely.
And then kind of through the middle of the year, I think our moods started to change. And then certainly with the start of this current lockdown that we're in, with the introduction of the curfew and everything, the energy just really it really went from any sense of novelty or fun or excitement to just kind of surviving and getting through it and kind of grounding down. And then with the most recent announcements that were made, that's probably been the hardest on the kids. They're both really devastated that they're not going back to school any sooner. My oldest one in particular, who's in year 5, is really missing his friends. It's been a really hard time for him to be isolated, but they also understand it. So
there's no
it's
choice.
yeah.
I think the word that I can best describe Sunday's announcements, because we are just 2 days post the road out, supposedly, is oppression. Yeah.
It feels very heavy at this point.
Yeah.
It's a technique I was using with my clients really early on in this, that I use for a lot of things. Anytime they're facing any kind of situation that's not what they asked for, all of us are facing situations like that, is that you ask, how is this happening to me? And how is this happening for me?
Yep.
So what are the benefits, and really trying to, and this isn't about, gratitude washing it, as I like to call it, and saying, oh, just be positive and we'll be fine. Cause that's not helpful either. That
doesn't acknowledge what's going on.
Yeah. And it denies people their feelings. And then, you lose the opportunity to actually work with those emotions, which is what the opportunity here is.
Right.
But I've got to say at this point, it's feeling a lot more like it's happening to me. And that being said, this has been a really, really, really beautiful example in some ways of both and, which is something that it's probably one of the concepts I bang on about the most with my clients. And I'm working on a book about it right now, which is this idea of expanding not only our emotional literacy, but our experience in this world by using a both and frame as opposed to either or. And most of us tend to think in either or. I can either be grateful or I can be sad. Whereas this experience for me has been one of, I am both concerned about the most vulnerable in our society and the potential impact of this virus on our healthcare system. And I'm concerned about the loss of civil liberties. And I'm concerned about the effects of isolation on people and the economic consequences. So it's been, I had a conversation with a girlfriend a couple of weeks ago, and I said, one thing that's quite interesting for me in this scenario is that so often when we deal with these kind of crisis situations, you kind of pick a side, and you're over here, you're over there. And I work a lot with this archetype of a spiritual warrior, this person who's really focused, and that phrase, to be honest, makes me a little uncomfortable sometimes. This kind of, there's a bit of a mismatch between spirituality and that kind of warrior mentality, but I embody it in this way that really brings me strength. Whereas for me right now, to hold the strongest position I can in all of this is to hold the midline.
Yeah.
And to actually not be constantly getting pulled from side to side. And to really just be constantly questioning my truth in this. What is my truth in this scenario? How do I want to show up? How do I want to behave? What are my priorities? And that's been quite a selfish energy, I think. For me, it's really been about myself and my family, maintaining our mental health and our mental wellness and our our bonds as best we can, having been locked in a small house together for 5 months.
That's an awesome reframe. Can you go over what it was again? Both and was it that you said?
Yes. So it's really about using
really
both and. And so as an example, like I've used this with people who are, let's say they're about to get married and they're freaking out because there's someone who's always had this freedom and they love the freedom, and it's either or. I can either be married or I can have this freedom. No. Maybe you can have both and. Now you can't always have both and. I want to be super clear about that with people. There are times, like if you turn around to your, but yeah, there is, you know, you can either take this job or take that job. You can either do this or do that. But in things like, you know, I can either be financially successful or I can spend time with my family. You know, can you expand that? So it's really a practice of expansion. And like I said, you don't always come up at the end and go, here's the ways I can do everything I want all the time, because you're just going to kill yourself. That hustle culture needs to die. If we can leave one thing behind from 2020, can we just rise and grind, hustle and grind? Can we just stop? Especially middle-aged women. We don't need that. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast? Can you bleep it out?
Totally allowed to swear.
Bullshit. Okay, good. I will try not to too often, but I get a little passionate sometimes.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, good. So it's really just about, you know, and you can do this very simply. You can put these issues down on paper and get really clear with yourself about, okay, well, what am I telling myself the choices between? I'm saying it's A or B, or it's this or it's that. Is there another possible way? So in that scenario, that client had to go to her partner and have a very vulnerable and honest conversation, which I wish more people would when they're feeling scared before they get married.
Especially before they get married.
Exactly. Yeah. And she had to say, look, I'm really terrified because I feel like I'm going to give up all this part of myself, which is what, you know, and he was able to say, but that's who you are. And that's why I love you. And I'm committed to allowing you to maintain that freedom within our relationship on an ongoing basis that may need to be discussed. You know, I don't know if she turned around and said, I want to leave for 2 years and see you later. You know, but that's any relationship, that's any marriage, is this constant revisiting of these agreements we think we've set in stone that are never set in stone.
No.
So with our feelings, I think we so often say to people, how are you feeling? I'm happy, I'm sad. And another key part of this is to start saying, I feel happy. I feel you are not this feeling. This feeling is transient. It's an emotion. And I get it. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm 2 days into a gut cleanse, which is, I had to give up coffee, and I am so angry that I've had to I am like a tantruming child in my head all the time. I can never have coffee again. Coffee's the only thing that makes me happy. Ridiculous. Yep. Yeah, ridiculous statements that you make when you're addicted to a substance that you're now giving up, which is exactly what I've just done. And you know, I can hear myself saying these things. I'm this and I'm that. No.
Deserve this and I want that.
Yep. Exactly. That feeling is going to pass. So we start with acknowledging that feeling, and then you just kind of keep growing it from there, I guess, and start to realize that you can feel so, like I think we just limit our experience in this world so much. We make it so small, especially women. I think, you know, we really put the lids on ourselves and try to shove ourselves into this box
and fit someone else's mold.
Yeah, because there's a real thing. The terror of expansiveness is what I call it, which sounds dramatic, but I am a writer, so I like to say things dramatically with big words. And it's scary. It's scary to have these kind of wide open possibilities.
Scary, but growth. That's where the growth happens.
Oh, without those possibilities and that expansiveness, there is no room for growth. So, absolutely.
So, you've come on an interesting journey. So, I'm going to ask you, what do you think your soul purpose is? Or do you have another term that you use for soul purpose? Because soul purpose is something that I've learned through being a Czech practitioner, and that's how I would define what my mission in life would be. But if you've got a different term for that, let me know. And what do you think yours is? Or have you found it?
Oh, okay. So soul purpose absolutely resonates with me. And I guess the language that I use, which just reframes it in a different way for people that maybe aren't as spiritually inclined. Because the word soul can be off-putting for people that don't want to be woo-woo. Now, you can't, my office is covered in bones and crystals and my ceremonial shamanic drum and feathers and tarot cards and so I'm fully spiritual woo-woo, like fully. There, I've just owed it myself. What I say to people is, what is it that you can't not do? So for me, that would be coaching and writing would probably be the two kinds of things. I've been coaching people, whether professionally as paid work or as advice giving, whether solicited or not is a whole other story. You know, I've had to do a lot of boundary work over the years. So that does resonate with me. And in terms of what it is, I think I am most certainly what I would describe as a multi-passionate individual. And I think it's only been very recently in my life, in my 40s, that I've been able to accept that about myself and to give myself permission to explore all these different things. Now, I've had to learn a lot about, I have ADHD, so I tend to be either completely disinterested or completely obsessed. And it's taken, like, I've got a Post-it note somewhere in here, I think it's fallen down, that says you're allowed to have a hobby, because I have this real, like, I get interested in something and I'm reading, like, you know, I go on a PubMed crawl and I'm up late reading scientific journal articles, and it's like, I want to be this expert, and then I'll talk about enrolling in a university course. And, you know, my bookshelf is a testament to these insane, completely weird obsessions that I've had over the years. So I think I've realized that it's multifaceted, and I don't think I know what it is just yet. I think I know what a lot of the components of it are. I think it's very much about helping people, women in particular, find their voice, and give themselves permission, especially working with creatives really, really lights me up. Can
you break down what you mean by creatives? People like who...
everybody is a creative. So that's, I mean, I really, one of the first courses that I will be putting the event page up for very shortly is it's a 4-week poetry course. And I've described it as a wanker free zone.
That's
so
awesome.
if you're someone who's coming to read good poetry or talk about bad poetry, like, you can't sit with us. Sorry, I'm going to be a mean girl. Go somewhere else. Because one of the things I think is, look, there's a lot of issues with social media and this insane 24/7 saturation that we have of distractions. One of the things that is amazing to me, though, is that the power systems around creatives, so, you know, publishing, recording artists, people reading the literary journals, that's those gatekeepers have fallen. If I want to publish a book, I can type it and pay $5 to convert it to some file and publish a book.
And it's like, where that was years of a process in the past.
Exactly.
That's been condensed, and, like,
you know, and one of the things I still keep my hand in, because it was part of my work career for a long time, is I still edit publications for people and sometimes help match them to a publisher. I don't work as an agent in any capacity, but I know people in the industry. And that's a long process. And you have to decide what you want out of everything. And, you know, sometimes it is or isn't. But, you know, you look at recording artists, you can put your videos up on YouTube and be the next Justin Bieber. You can, again, for better or for worse, you know, I don't know, sometimes. But at the end of the day, I can listen to something and think, well, that's a bit shit. That's not like the cool music I listen to. But it doesn't matter. Because if somebody else out there is touched by that and feels something and has this emotional, visceral response to something that you have created, that's art, baby. That's, you know, you can be creative with your cooking. You're creative with your movement practices. You know, and you understand the emotional, it's like the cellular saturation that happens when you allow yourself to express yourself in a way that's not, you know, the way that you're supposed to, or the way that you were taught when you did your PT certificate, or, you know, whatever that is, when you again, it's expansiveness. It's opening yourself up. So the first thing I say to people when they say, I'm not very creative, is I'm like, that's bullshit.
Everyone's
I'm going to
creative.
call you on that. Everybody has the capacity to be creative. The thing I think stops people from doing that is the incredible amount of judgment that we have as a society about what a creative is or isn't. This notion of a starving artist, you know, and there's a lot of tragic stories in the world of the creatives, and I understand why that's so. It's a painful thing to put these little pieces of yourself out there for judgment, because that's what, especially these days when you're putting things online. It can be terrifying. So yeah, anyone and everyone.
So when we talk about what you've come, like, where did you start? Like, where did you start your career, and where did you think you were going, and how has that changed? Because I've known you for 8 years, and I've known you to do at least 3 different things. So you've had
so many different jobs.
Yep. So you were a blogger, and you were a writer, and then you owned the restaurant, and then what have you been doing, and what? Yeah, you go.
So, like, this is such a long story that can start so long ago, but I'll just tell you briefly. When I was growing up, I was a writer and a dancer. Those were the things that I in super duper sad emo, like, would dance to the saddest music in my bedroom and cry about the boy that I loved, and I would try to call him, and then my brother would beat the internet, and because it was the 80s, some people listening won't understand what I'm talking about, but that's okay. And I would write these really tragic stories and these tragic poems, and I was recognized for my writing. I knew it was something that I was quite good at, but I think around 15 or 16, my body shape changed a lot. And this, I look at dance now, I look at choreographers like Matt Stefanina and the people that he attracts, and you're a dancer as well. And there's so many places now that are completely inclusive of all colors, all shapes and sizes. Like, everybody is welcome. Everybody's a dancer. Everybody's a creative. We all have this capacity, but that was not the era that I was living in. And I had really kind of reached a point where I had reached as far as I could go with that as a potential career path, because I was so tall, and I was, quote unquote fat. I was not fat at the time. And then I would write these poems and stuff. But then again, I think around 15 or 16, I started to really, and this has been such an interesting piece of my work, to go back and be like, where did I even get this bullshit message from? Because it wasn't my family, actually. But somewhere along the line, I decided it was really kind of time to, grow up and buckle down and focus on a career. And so I did a lot more sciences throughout high school, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. And I went to a liberal arts college and did a mixed degree in political science, human rights, international relations, religious studies, and English literature.
Lots of everything.
Lots of everything, but political science. At the time, I really wanted to go work for the United Nations. Yeah. And then I did a human rights internship immediately following university, and realized very quickly that my little heart didn't actually do very well with that work. It really took a toll on me emotionally and physically.
Did you know at the time that you had ADHD then? Or when was that diagnosed?
Look, we've joked about it my entire life. I was only officially diagnosed a few years ago, and didn't pursue a diagnosis for a long time, because I thought, well, I'm not going to take medication for it, so what's the point? I'm really glad that I've done that now, because there's other people that are close to me in my life who have it, and it's given me a different way to be able to talk to them about some of the challenges that they're experiencing. I didn't think I had it because my academic grades were always top of the class. And I was really under this disillusion, as so many people are, that if you have ADHD, you do bad at school.
Yeah. So you didn't fit all of the categories and didn't tick off all of the in your own mind.
But academics, knowing what I know now, academics was my hyper focus. Right. That was really my safe place. That was actually incredibly easy for me to excel, especially back then when it was like, memorize, spit it back out. Yeah. but I mean, I also went to a liberal arts school where we stayed up until 5 or 6 in the morning, you know, drinking pitchers of the beer and arguing with our profs. We'd be sitting around smoking cigarettes and arguing about these really lofty philosophical ideas. And it's amazing how many of those conversations have come back to me in recent months in the current context. And so then I came back and I had a couple jobs here and there. I worked at a rehab on and off for years on a psych ward. And then I ended up, I moved out west. I was working at a hotel after a breakup. I made a decision within like an hour. I called someone up and was like, "You still looking for teachers in Korea?" And 2 weeks later I was on a plane to Korea.
Wow.
And I ended up there for 4 years and then came to visit my mom here in Australia. And she introduced me to the very nice young man that she had been working with, and who's my now husband. And 24 hours later we were engaged. So
wow.
that's how you can see this tendency to all in, which so far, you know, touch wood,
it's worked
out really well, actually.
2 kids later,
it's a roller coaster. It's been an adventure, but you know, it's all right. I'm here for it. And then we had kids. So once we had kids, I was doing a lot of freelance writing. I was a regular contributor to Women's Health, and I wrote for Runner's World for a long time, and I was a columnist there for a bit. And I really enjoyed that. But it was great because I was able to be at home with the kids. And then we, as you know, we opened a paleo cafe.
Yep.
And on one level, on a personal level, it was incredibly successful. We had a huge impact on the community. The feedback was amazing. We were also part of a franchise, which came with really, really hard things for all of us that were part of that franchise. And it was difficult, but again, and it was, you know, it was an amazing experience, an amazing opportunity. From that, we had made the decision to close the cafe, and one of our suppliers rang up and said, "Do you need an order for next week?" And we said, "Actually, we're going to close on Sunday permanently. It's really sad." And this woman, Dina, who eventually became a very dear friend, said, "I'm so sad to hear that." And then she rang back about 5 minutes later and said, "Listen, are any of your staff looking for work?" Yeah. So I ended up becoming a sales rep for a health food company. And we were a team of all women, and I really enjoyed that work. For a long time, but the organization itself went through quite a lot of changes while I was there, and I was just quite tired and burnt out by the end of it, kind of being part of that process. And so I left that job and I took a job cleaning, doing domestic cleaning, which is so funny because there was this little part of me that was like, you know, scrubbing toilets, and at times I'd be going, "I have a degree and you know." But then at the same time, it kind of gave me exactly what I wanted. Was this job where, like, I went to work, I came home, there was no emails, there was no
looking
analytics,
for chefs, no looking for
no reports, no doing rosters, no doing financial statements. It was, you know, it was, and I won't even say it wasn't just a job. I was part of, again, it was an crazy, amazing team that I was part of. We really were like family. They're still amazing. It was all eco-friendly cleaning. I really enjoyed it for the most part, you know, and it was physically challenging. And obviously with any team that's like a family, there comes some, you know, interesting issues at times, but that's
learning experiences.
Lots of those. And I loved it. And then one day I think it was around October last year, so just about a year from now, I had been sick the month before. I'd had just a nasty cold that kind of really hit me quite hard. But I had been very mature about it, and I took 3 whole days off work, and I didn't go to CrossFit for a week, and, you know, I rested and I felt better, and it was just a head cold as far as I was concerned, and we still don't quite know. But then about a month after that, so it was, it must be coming up because it was school holidays this time last year. And I got up and I didn't feel well. And I thought, God, I feel really sick again. This is annoying. So I took some Nurofen and I dropped my kids off where they were going for the day. And I went to work and I kind of started to feel like I was getting a fever, and I started to feel a bit shaky and a bit, you know, oh, this isn't good. And it's actually on my own that day, which is quite unusual, but I was fine doing that. So I'd said that I was fine doing that. And I started to feel really panicked and have this I was like, something's not right. So I went outside, packed everything up, went outside, got my car, which is stupid. Should have just called an ambulance, but hindsight's 2020. rang my friend and said, are you at home? If I drive to your house, can you drive me to the hospital? Because I didn't want to have to pay for hospital parking for 2 days or something. She said, sure. Yeah. And by the time I got to her house 10 minutes later, I couldn't get out of my car. I had to lean on my horn for her to come and get me. Wow. And so I was in the hospital. I was in the most severe pain I have ever experienced in my life. They had no idea what was happening with me. I had had some ovarian pain the night before, which I occasionally get with my cycle. So they thought it could be a burst ovary, it could be septicemia, it could be this, it could be that. They were checking, they were doing scans, and they were doing all these things. Anyways, long story short, they ended up discharging me the next day. No treatment, nothing. No. So I went and saw my GP, and she was very thorough and followed up. And it was about a week after the whole thing that she actually confirmed that I had pneumonia.
Wow.
And the scans showed emerging pneumonia, but the doctor said, I actually think it's receding. I think you've probably had it for between 4 and 6 weeks. And she said, I see a lot of women in this scenario
just think you've got a cold and just get on with life.
And they just push through and they just push through and they just push through. So that was, that was a huge concern financially. I was a casual worker. That meant complete loss of my income. But at the end of the day, there was no way that I could physically go back to work for a long time after that. And so I think I just kind of thought, like, it just, I knew on some level that the whole experience was a bit of an initiation through sickness. So it was, it was really a dark night of the soul. Sorry, excuse me. On so many levels. And it was probably a few nights after I'd been home from hospital. And I only vaguely remember this even happening, but I sat up in my sleep and I grabbed a journal and I started writing, and I could see my hand writing, but I had no idea what I was writing, and I had no physical sensation of writing. So channeled writing, as you would call it, which is when you kind of, you get so into the flow that you feel like something is taken over and it's completely beyond your control.
Yeah. Or a download.
Or a download. And so that, that just really tossed me into, so we're nearly 12 months after that. And it has been like a daily initiation process since then. The amounts of growth that I've experienced, the amounts of challenge that I've experienced in that time. And when I say challenge, obviously the context of what we're experiencing now, but like personal, emotional,
and spiritual, and
a lot of spiritual healing, a lot of intergenerational healing work that I've undertaken myself, a lot of shamanic journeying, which was a very, none of this was new to me. It was all like a remembering of something that I'd been connected to a long time ago in the past.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yep.
Can we talk about something that you've told me about in your past?
Yep.
Did that have connection to what we're talking about now? Because I know that you went on a journey as I think you were a teenager, where you dabbled with drugs?
Yes. So no, I don't think there is a connection there. I actually drink now, and have for, like, I was in recovery for just under 10 years. So I was completely sober.
Right. Yeah.
So I do actually drink now and have used plant medicine as well.
Yeah.
As part of this journey, but as part of it, there's a time and a place for it, kind of thing.
Totally.
I think that the use of drugs and alcohol that I experienced in my teens and 20s, and this is very obviously anecdotal, but very common amongst other conversations I have had with people who feel a very strong spiritual connection. I actually think that sometimes that kind of use of drugs and alcohol is a means of shutting yourself off from that, because it can actually get, like, I've had times, recent months where I've been like, can I please just sleep tonight? Like, can I just
shut off the noise, because you've opened, like, it's like you've tapped into something that you don't know how to. And I agree with you. As a kid, as a teenager, if that's starting to happen to you and your intuition's opening up and you don't know how to control that, you just think you're nuts. So you use your things to block it out. Whereas hopefully as you evolve spiritually and you get that maturity, you're able to recognize that there's other ways of being able to block that out. You need to learn how to do that. And it's not blocking it out, but it's controlling it more. Like
it is control. And I mean, I say controlling it, then I kind of laugh because at the end of the day, I have zero control over some of these things that happen to me. Right. But, I can control how I engage with it, I think. And I've learned a lot about protecting my own personal energy, protecting my space. And some people that's smudging in crystals, other people that's praying to God. This is such a highly personal, individual, personal thing. And so I went through this process where I just started writing. I just started writing because I was still really sick. So I would, take the kids to school and come home and really I couldn't walk to the end of my road and back without, I would start yawning. I was just going to lay down on the side of the road and go to sleep. I was so exhausted. And there's obviously quite a high risk with pneumonia. You have things like chronic fatigue syndrome, and you can develop, and I dealt with that maybe as a teenager. I think it was actually probably more depression than a chronic fatigue syndrome. And I started to do a lot of this work, and I started to really I started to do a lot of work with kind of my teenage self and my childhood self. And, it brought up a lot of grief. There was a lot of joy in my childhood. There was a lot of fun. There was a lot of dance, a lot of movement, a lot of expression, a lot of writing, a lot of singing, a lot of, I was always the kid that would walk up to someone on the beach and be like, "Hi, I'm Meghann. Do you want to be my friend?" And I'm still like that as an adult, and it embarrasses my family sometimes, but I'm my husband will find me having the deepest conversations with people that I was in the takeaway line with or something. Cause I think, I'm a writer. Everybody has a story. It's very fascinating to me. But I was doing this work one night, and I had this really strong vision of myself at about 15. And I was in my bedroom, and I took all my poems and my writing notebooks and my journals, and I put them in this box, and I put them under my bed. And I realized in that moment that it was probably within 4 weeks of me doing that I experienced my first bout of depression. And so depression for me, and we can certainly get more into this, I think there's a lot of ties between depression and a lack of creative expression. Also a lack of community. And I do think there certainly is a biochemical component to it, and medication plays a role for so many people in so many different ways. And I've used medication on and off over the years, and I wouldn't be here if I hadn't. And that's the honest truth of it. Yeah. So that's, I have no shame in admitting that.
It's a saving grace.
Absolutely. So I kind of came out of that and really just rediscovered this kind of I'm just going to start showing up as myself. And if people like it, great. And if they don't like it, then, oh, well, I'm a big girl. I don't have to be offended by this. And so I had been kind of coaching people on and off the whole time for this last 10 years, but a lot of the coaching that I used to do, and I'm trained as a coach. So I have a certification as a certified professional coach from the International Coach Academy.
Right.
And I got that certification 12, 13 years ago, back at the time when nobody actually knew anything about what a coach was or a life coach. And people still don't know. Still don't know sometimes what I do. I'm like, oh, it's a bit of everything.
Yep.
It is a broad term, and there's so many niche markets now as well.
Yeah.
And so I'd kind of been coaching, but a lot of the coaching I used to do was weight loss coaching. I'm a PT as well. So I was kind of dabbling in that. It was, writing meal plans and holding people accountable for weight loss goals. And again, that's fine if that's what the client wants, but I have zero interest in working with people now. So I work, like I said, or as you read in the bio, it's not for the faint of heart. I've had so many people say, you shouldn't put that, you're going to scare people off. And I'm like, I don't care. I want to weed out the people
who really want the work or really want to do the work and save you the time.
Exactly.
And
you know,
save
it's
their
like
time as well. Like save
if I
them.
show up for your primal core class and I'm like, I want to have ripped abs, and I'm like, but I just want to lay here and not actually do any of these exercises, Tanya. Like it's not going to work. And with your coaching people about their health, if they're showing up day after day after day and going, no, I'm still not eating well, no, I'm not getting enough sleep. Okay, well, what's actually going on there? What's the actual issue?
It's nothing to do with what they really want, because
No.
that's not what they really want, and that's not what they really need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then I signed up for stand-up comedy, which had been a lifelong dream. And I started dabbling in that. I only got to do a few gigs, but I had great feedback, and then everything shut down. And I've gone to an online one, but I don't like it without the feedback. I've participated in a couple virtual story slams, which is online storytelling things. Started performing my poetry. Working on numerous books at once.
So exciting. Like, I know like one little bit of what you've been doing. Like, why are you not telling the whole world that you're doing all of this?
That's a great question. If I was a coach, that's why I would ask someone that. So, because I'm really scared. I mean, that's the really honest answer. It's been, look, I've got one of my absolute best friends in the entire world, who is an amazing, amazing person. Hi, Shmoopy, if you're listening to this. She is, she's very connected spiritually and has, you know, her soul's really rooted in her work and her business as well, but she's a marketing person. So every time I offer anything, or I'm setting like prices for things, you know, I call her and I'm like, what about this title? She's like, that title's too long. No one's even going to finish reading your title. You've got to, you know, sell them what they want, give them what they need. And most of our conversations consist of me going, you know, like, because I'm going to hopefully self-publish my first book of poems soon, because I realized I have enough poems to just put them all in a book and put them out there. And I was like, I don't even care if anyone ever buys it. It's just about holding a book in my hand, because it's been a lifelong. And she's like, bullshit. Of course you want people to buy your, but like, what are you even talking about? And so I still have this real discomfort around being financially successful as somebody whose work is rooted in such deep spiritual practice at times. And my clients, you know, that's the work that we're doing together. So this is, you know, that's why don't I tell everyone? I don't like to tell people until I know for sure I'm going to do something, because again, it can be a bit of a flavor of the month. And then this year's been really challenging, because it was really kind of all systems go. Yeah. Back at second term. And because it takes so much from me energetically sometimes with my clients, because of the kind of coaching that we're doing, because it's, you know, it's not surface level. I'm very cautious of how many clients I can actually take on. So I take on very limited numbers of clients. I have a few who've stayed, like usually most of my clients are with me between kind of 3 or 6 months. They tend to come to me with a goal. And we kind of spend the first month working out what their actual goal is, because it's never the goal that they think they have. Never. And then the second month is kind of working out, you know, what's holding you back from this goal, or why haven't you pursued it so far? Yeah. And then the third month and beyond is really about coming up with a bit of a roadmap and giving them the tools to kind of eventually be able to coach themselves. Now, through this whole Corona thing, I've got a couple clients who've stayed with me longer than they usually would, because they've said, like, you're my touchstone in the week. And a lot of them see therapists as well, but I mean, coaches and therapists offer very different things. Very different. Very different. So it's, yeah. And then every time I've kind of been like, yeah, the kids are going back to school in a week or two, and then I can just buckle down and get this all done, because the content's there. It's just the technology side of things, which is that's my real negative self-talk. And I'm actually not. I'm actually very good with technology, but I hate it. And it's harder. I have to think about it, which makes me think I'm stupid. About it. Yeah. I have to actually work
and no one likes to think that about themselves.
No. So I've just kind of been holding off. And now I've kind of reached a point where I'm like, I don't really know if they're going to go back this year at all, or stay back, or what's going to happen. So now I'm just having to kind of pivot again. Yeah. Which has been a lot of pivoting, a lot of swiveling around this year.
Sideways, very definitely. Yeah. So On all fronts, what
Yeah.
has been your biggest challenge? As in, and I'm going to say it's probably yourself, holding yourself back.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So how has that presented itself, and how do you overcome that? Like, and how would you coach yourself? Like if you were your client who came into you and sat down.
Yep. Okay, well, how I coach myself is different from how I coach my client in some ways. So
Yep.
I actually, the terminology that I will use with myself sometimes is stop being a dumb bitch.
Right.
And I know that doesn't sit
I was
well
going to say,
with everyone. That's why like, I don't, if a client walks in, I'm like, you just need to stop being a dumb bitch. That's never what I would say. But for me, that is actually when I'm saying it to myself, because I know myself, that is actually an expression that I'm using that is completely grounded in self-compassion.
Right.
Because this is where I reach this point, and this, ADHD people love to procrastinate. Self-sabotage makes you procrastinate. Creatives love to procrastinate because your poem is never going to be right. Like nothing I put out into the world
will ever be perfect.
It's never, and if you watch any of my videos that I put up online, I make fun of the mess in the background. I make fun of myself because that's the only way I can get past that, because I am embarrassed about the clutter in my house right now. And so
if you point it out before somebody else points it out, it's okay because you've loved it at first.
Yeah, exactly. And it is funny. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I really don't actually care. It's just these brief, and that's all societal messaging about what your house should look like or what your hair should look like, or, and there's so much bullshit about social media. Like, oh, your background should be free of space so they can and that's fine. If you need a coach who can tell you directly and succinctly in one single sentence, I'm not your girl. Like, I'm going to tell you stories. I'm going to take you on a trip. We're going, we're going to go on a journey together. So pack your bag. Let's go.
And pull everything out of the cupboard.
Yeah. But I am definitely my own biggest enemy.
Yeah.
I still to this day, when I write a poem, which my poems are never written, like I never sit there writing a poem and thinking like, oh, what word am I like, they all just come to me out of nowhere, often in the middle of the night. And I remember reading a description once, and I wish I could remember what the poet's name was. And she had grown up, I think, on the Midwest in the US in the kind of 60s, 50s or 60s. And she said she used to hear the poems coming across the prairies. Wow. So she would hear, she would notice this change in the energy and this whistling. And she would have to run inside and get a pencil because if she didn't catch it, it would be gone. And I really feel that. I've got poems that are written and the ink's all blotted because I jumped out of the bathtub naked to write or things like that. So, but when I read one of my poems to someone, my heart is pounding out of my chest the entire time. Which is why one of the challenges I often issue in this course that I'm going to be offering soon is about getting people to write and perform their own poetry in a very small, safe, wanker-free zone. Because I reckon if you, that is, I've done stand-up comedy. I've spoken in front of thousands of people at thousands of people at a time at different events, and there's nothing more vulnerable to me than sharing something so intimate, and poetry is very intimate. But what I have learned in the last 12 months is that it doesn't get easier. You just have to deal with it. And that's where I think a lot of Brene Brown, our holy mother, goddess Brene Brown. And she talks a lot about that vulnerability hangover. You still get those every time you're vulnerable. It's not like you practice being vulnerable enough and you just stop getting them. I still get one every time, and it's like a physical hangover. I feel sick. But you just get better and better at going, oh, well, I was vulnerable. Okay, move on. And it maybe doesn't last as long, or it's not quite as intense or as overwhelming as it was the first couple times.
Or debilitating. It doesn't stop you from doing it again.
Exactly. And that was, stand-up comedy. That was why I did that, because I wanted, I've wanted to do it my whole life. People have told me I should do it for a long time.
You are
I
very
love
good.
making people laugh.
Yeah.
And I just really was like, what's the worst case scenario here is that people don't laugh at my jokes. And it was a random draw and I ended up being first on stage.
Oh, wow.
So, but I was so actually really glad to get it out of the way. And then a few weeks later, I got invited to go do this gig at George's in Fitzroy. It was like an open mic night for people that were really, really new to the scene. And I got there and all the comics were kind of introducing each other beforehand and they were all in their 20s.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to say they were babies, but they weren't actually babies. I mean, they had like partners and houses and cars. So reasonably, they must have been in their 20s, but very, very young to me.
Yep.
And they were petrified.
Yeah.
And one of them said to me, she was like, how are you so are you really scared? And I was like, no, I'm excited. Like, I think I've got good jokes. I want to see what happens. I want to see if people think they're good. Well, make people laugh. And they were like, how can you be so calm? And I was like, because none of this is real. Like this is the wisdom you gain.
And it doesn't change who you are from the moment you walked into the moment you walk out.
No, none of it's
because
actually
you're still
relevant
the same person. Yep.
to my experience of this world. And all of this stuff that we make up is important, i.e. mostly what other people think of us doesn't matter at all. And when I have to think about why I do what I do, why do I coach, why do I so passionately speak to people, it's because the thought of people laying on their deathbed, never having lived any of the things in their life that they were actually excited about because they were worried about what someone else would think of them and how they would be judged, that breaks my fucking heart.
That makes me cry.
It does. Like, it's a physical pain that I feel when I see that people are too scared to show up as themselves. And I think it held me back from coaching for a while because one of my super strengths is that I don't care what people, I mean, again, if you watch I have videos on a comedy page that are also not safe for work, but like, I don't care what people think of me. I'm just kind of here to have a good time as much as I can.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to tell other people that. Like, it's not something you can bottle. It's not something you can convince them of. I can't give people their self-worth. I can't put them in a mirror where they can see themselves the way their partner sees them. We don't have these magic tricks. But instead, what I've committed to is this process of helping them work towards that, so that even if they only achieve a sliver of that freedom, that I know is possible, because I just want
that we can see.
Exactly. But even if it's only a tiny bit, then I guess that comes back to my belief that, everything is happening exactly as it's meant to. And I stand by that most of the time. I'm a human being who has my moments of, why?
Let us have a COVID, but yes.
Exactly. But generally speaking, that's what kind of pushes me to do that work. So
that's awesome. It's amazing to be able to be a part of somebody else's journey. And that was one of my questions that I won't be able to ask because we're running out of time. One of my questions was like, how has your journey to find your soul purpose intersected with others? But you just described it perfectly, that our job might not be to, because I'm a coach as well, but it might not be to tell people what they should be doing. Our job is to help them uncover what they should be doing. And I say to people, I see so much potential in you, but that doesn't matter, because what matters is the potential that you see in yourself.
Absolutely. And it's where I'll be super quick because I know we're almost out of time. I always run out of time on these things because I love to talk. I watched a video ages ago and I can't think of what the guy's name was. He's another coach, but he was talking about this differentiation between seeing yourself as a guide and not an expert.
Yeah.
Because I'm not an expert. I don't have all the answers. And then a few weeks ago, a client wrote a testimonial for me. And one of the things she said that really made me cry and feel really happy was that Meghann has her skin in the game. I am doing my inner work as I'm encouraging and holding space for my clients. I hate that term, by the way, holding space. there's nothing else to describe. It's so overused, like they're journeys.
I know. There's nothing better that we've come up with yet.
I know we need new vernacular for this industry. Because I will tell my clients when they're like, how are you? I'm like, oh, I was sobbing at like 2 a.m. and like pulling goddess cards trying to sort out what the hell to do with my life. Like, I'm super honest. And that's my strength, because then I'm constantly connected to the vulnerability that it requires for my clients to show up and do the work, which leads me to be compassionate. And that brings us back to being expansive, because those are expansive feelings. They're not limiting. They're not contraction feelings. They open you up.
Thank you for being so authentic.
Oh, I don't really know another way to be anymore, I don't think. So
this has been a really beautiful conversation. Thank you for being with me. And we have to do more, and I have to get you on again, because like I said, I've got a list of questions that we didn't even touch on, as well as the other things that you wanted to talk about as well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Tanya. Bye.
Bye.